Good morning, everyone. We're just going to take a few minutes and make sure everybody can get in from the waiting room, and then we will get started.
Is everyone caffeinated enough this morning?
Hopefully so, right? All right, I'm going to get us rolling. Good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Holtzclaw. I have the honor of being the local director of ULI Memphis and executive director of Region Smart. I am thrilled to have all of you join us this morning for this really exciting conversation. Just to sort of put us in context, we started the Building a City We Can All Afford series back in September, which seems a really, really long time ago right now for me. And where Doug McGowan sort of kicked us off talking about where we are in Memphis. And then we had 2 sessions where we brought in 6 people from different cities talking about best practices and things they are doing to sort of address affordability issues in their communities. And we have had the honor of this entire process being moderated by Roshun Austin and Scott Kern, who are 2 developers working here in Memphis. And so when we were talking about what we wanted to do on this 4th session, we wanted to reach out and bring some different perspectives in. And so we identified 4 I feel like it's insulting to call them all emerging real estate professionals, because some of them have been doing that. Makes it all sound like they started working last month, and many of them have been working for several years or more, doing some really exciting things here in our community. But we are going to be joined today by Mariko Krause, who's a program associate with the Medical District Collaborative here in town, Safari Love, who is the director of operations for Design Love Studio, and Joyce Selina Love, who's an architect with Design Love Studio. And we are also going to be joined by Brent Hooks, who's the CAO of Allworld Project Management. Brent is going to be a little late in joining us this morning, so you'll just see him sort of pop in. They had a last minute proposal for a big project this morning that they had not anticipated, and the client scheduled it for right at 8:30. So he is going to pop on as soon as he is done with that, and we'll be glad to add him to the conversation. So before I turn all of this over to our great group of panelists and moderators, I do just want to draw your attention and say thanks to our sponsors that you see up on the screen. We literally could not do what we do without the generosity and support of all of these wonderful sponsors. Many of you are on the call right now, and I just wanted to take a moment and thank you all for your continued support. So with that, I will turn off my screen and turn it over to, I think first we've asked Roshun and Scott to sort of share their overall thoughts or themes on the series as a whole. And I believe we're going to start with Roshun. So with that, I will turn it over to her.
Good morning, everybody. Glad you can join us again. For those who are joining us for the second or third time. I am excited about today's session because we have an opportunity to hear from individuals working in Memphis, and some of them are younger than me. I think all of them are younger than me, so they're our future of this work. I wanted to quote, Anna and I had the opportunity with a small group to go to St. Louis to look at something that ULI St. Louis was doing with their public officials. And one of the speakers at the event was the former mayor of Kansas City, Sly James. And one thing he said, and I wrote it down in my little book, you can't bash your city and expect it to perform for you. So in the beginning of our conversations about building a city that we can all afford, we heard from our CAO, Doug McGowan, and he laid out the facts. And that's one thing I like about Doug, because you can explain decisions that we make in our city or anywhere in life based on facts and data. It's hard to explain things based on morality or ideology or things like that, or theology if you're talking about religion. If we use facts and data, we often have more productive conversations. And so for us to start our conversations off with the facts and data, these are the realities. These are the challenges that we have here. And there are many opportunities, I like to think. And then we brought in speakers from peer cities with sometimes similar challenges, or they've had them in the past. And they had unique ways of addressing those challenges. And so today I want to hear from our um, panelists about what they took away from learning about, some of them for the first time, some of the challenges that we face as a city, or if they already knew about many of those challenges. And then looking at what other people have done in other cities, and how does that play in Memphis. And one of the things in our conversations in the chats over the last few weeks, some of the questions that came up made me recognize that in our industry, very often, many people who are very concerned about the city don't know all of the challenges. And once they learn those challenges, they may have very unique ideas in helping us solve those challenges, because sometimes we just are down in the weeds of the work and don't have great creative ideas necessarily on solving challenges, because we're just trying to get through the day-to-day of the obstacles that are presented to us. And so I won't go on. I didn't want to go into a lot of detail because I don't want to take away any of the comments that the panelists may share with us today. And so Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Roshun. This has really been a great series for me, as I've obviously hearing, and I agree with what Roshun said, it really, in order to look at how to fix something, you really need to understand what the problems and challenges are. I love what Roshun said about, you can't bash your city. And I think that instead of looking at Memphis as full of challenges, let's look at it as filled with opportunities. And also, it was nice to hear John Shepard from Elmington Capital, his perspective about, hey, this is what Memphis is doing right. I think Memphis is doing a lot of things well, or it has a lot of great opportunities. And I would love to find out how, from the panelists, was that encouraging? Was it, were you encouraged by some of the things that you heard and some of the successes that we saw in other cities? For me, it was encouraging to see how other cities successfully tackled their challenges. And I'm sure that once you get one challenge taken care of, you move on to the next set of challenges. And I think that I'm hopeful and encouraged that Memphis is doing that. And I think that there's a lot that we could teach other cities, or in the next 5 years, I hope that we're participating in these forums as a guest speaker, some of us on this phone call, and saying, hey, this is what, we did in Memphis that was successful, and this is what you can do in your city. And I think the last thing that I've learned or have been made aware of is, here in Memphis, more than ever, we need to cooperate as a real estate community, work together, and get past this. And this is a mindset as a developer that I often have, is a scarcity mindset, that there's only limited resources, only limited opportunities here. And, to share them is, is to lose an opportunity. And I'm coming to believe that that's not the case. I think that the more that we cooperate together, share information, help one another along, the bigger that pie gets. So those are kind of my takeaways. And, I'd love, and I know Roshun and I, as we talked about this in kind of a preview, we want to hear from the panelists, about, what was your perception of those challenges that Doug laid out, and what kind of opportunities do you see? So why don't we open it up to our panelists? So right now we've got Joyce, Selina Love, Safari Love, and Mariko Krause. And so given what we just talked about, and why don't you guys take just a minute or two to talk about those challenges and opportunities that you see in Memphis.
Hey, before y'all get started, if I could just from a logistics perspective, if you are not on the panel right now, if you wouldn't mind turning your cameras off, just so the panelists can see each other, I think that it'll help them coordinate their conversation a little bit better. And then a little bit later on, we'll open up the audience, and then we'd love for all of you to turn your cameras back on, but it helps them to be able to see each other and not interrupt so much. Great, thanks everybody. Go ahead.
All right, who's going
Hey,
first?
good morning. Good morning. Hey. All right. First of all, thank you all very much for inviting us into the conversation. It's very powerful. A lot of things going on in Memphis right now. And when you start thinking about Doug's conversation, I think that I agree. Memphis has come a long way, and we're doing some wonderful things. I'm homegrown, I'm a native. So even if you went back, we don't have to go 20 years. We don't even have to go 10 years back. We go 5 years back. If you was in Memphis 5 years ago, you left and you came back today, it's not the same city. I mean, it's some beautiful changes is happening right now. But in the same vein, there's so much more to do. So I was amazed at Doug just being transparent, and with him just saying, this is where we are. These are the facts. That inspired trust. And I think that's important for Memphis leaders to be transparent, to lay the facts out. And that's going to allow the community and other leaders to want to be engaged, to want to support more, because they truly understand the issues that we're presented with today. I thought it was interesting also to find out how the overall thought, we're growing, we want to grow, we're doubling in size. However, our tax base didn't. So those lessons learned, it wasn't malicious. Those in power at the time making these decisions, it was for the good of Memphis. But again, you're starting to learn. So I think some of those challenges, what we need to do, we need to find a way for Memphis to either qualify for Formula A or create a Formula C. Let's make some things happen here. And we really need to change that property tax. We're talking about urban infill. We're talking about, these small parcels that the larger developers, it's not feasible for them to engage in. So how do we empower and make it feasible for the smaller, the local developers to impact, to get that missing middle, So it needs to be some changes, property taxes, zoning. Those are the challenges we're faced. And I like what Doug said with what it was General Colin Powell. Don't let adverse facts stand in the way of a good decision. So he posed a challenge. Are we up for it? And I honestly believe that everyone here today, they're up for it. We're ready to take that challenge on.
Thanks, Safari.
I'll jump in. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mariko. I'm a program associate with the Memphis Medical District Collaborative. Safari, I completely agree with your sentiments. And I'll just add, before I kind of get into my thoughts on the previous sessions, I'll give some context about what I work on. So I spend half of my time at the Medical District Collaborative working on our real estate program, and then the other half working on our quality public spaces team. And on the real estate side, we work to increase the housing supply in the district through a variety of tools and strategies. And then on the public spaces side, I focus mostly on the district's green spaces, streetscape, events, and helping to advocate for public safety. And most of the public spaces work is primarily focusing on the areas that sit in between the institutions and their surrounding neighborhoods. And I'm passionate about how the built environment affects people's well-being and health. And so I see a lot of opportunity to use real estate to improve public health and create meaningful social change. And so I was incredibly impressed by all the speakers and the places they represented, from Detroit to Little Rock, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Kansas City. And these are our peers that are, not only are we learning from them, but just like hearing their experiences in a way validate what's happening in Memphis, and challenge ourselves, our city, to think about ways to improve our own industry.
Great. Thank you, Mariko.
So I guess I'm last on this. Yes. Okay. So, I mean, honestly, I agree with Safari in his term about how it's spread out, how the fact that this simple decision affected how Memphis operates. But it was even beyond that. The fact that because we have this large land mass that's part of Memphis now, that affects how services, how the city provides resources to each and every neighborhood in Memphis. Excuse me. So just the thought of how that made an impact, and so many of the challenges, so many of the complaints that you hear is like, there's not enough police force, there's not enough fire services, there's not enough money to go around. Yes, because of how far spread out all of our neighborhoods are from each other. So how great is it that they have incorporated this new Memphis 3.0 plan so that we can start bringing that back in? The concept of building up versus building out. What does that mean? Well, we're not talking about building up like as in skyscraper style. No, we're talking about building up each and every individual community that's in Memphis so that they can actually become more sustaining, something that can actually provide more revenue for the city of Memphis. The fact that these decisions can now be brought inwards so that we can take care of ourselves. And that really struck me as that the effects that search policies can have on a city as a whole. And then when I think about all of the topics that all the different cities that we got to investigate through each one of those speakers, they addressed a common problem, excuse me, that people were important. And that to me, the Memphis 3.0 set a precedent. And I'm not talking about how they started saying what certain lands should be used for and things like that. I'm talking about how they even created it. What did they do? They went out into the neighborhoods, they engaged the people. They actually went to individual CDCs, they went to community meetings, they tried to specifically engage the people because we needed to have that active engagement. We needed to have the efforts of what we wanted to do made clear. And developers, all of us within the real estate industry need to keep that particular precedent going. That needs to be our way of addressing them. There was this quote that I recently heard, I can't take credit for it, but it was move at the speed of trust. And that really made an impact on me because our greatest asset is people, but it can also be our greatest challenge to get over the perceptions of people. So how much we need to really engage the community, because once they're educated, once they realize perhaps the ideas that can be implemented into their communities before it even comes about, something that Shannon Jacks had pointed out, that they went to the community beforehand, let them get all of their fears and issues out of the way in the beginning. And then we can start to engage as to, okay, well, what's the next step? what can we do? What are some of those things that we are visualizing for this community with your input? You are a major part of this conversation and putting the community at ease. And then that lays the path for whatever the developers are coming in. And those same developers are, again, very in tune to what the community wants, what the community needs, but they've already got essentially the major challenges, the major issues that would have been addressed the way that we do it now, you know, not checking off that mandatory community meeting engagement and saying, hey, yes, I had my meeting, and so now I can proceed on. No, the people are of value and they feel it. So just, I think from all of the people, all of the speakers that we had, the fact that they engage people into the conversation was very important.
So I have a question for the panel regarding that, because as a developer, I'll be transparent here. The idea of community engagement, I agree that it's great to involve the community and get buy-in. But I'll also confess that I'm afraid of it, right? Because, you know, do the naysayers come out and do you, so I'm just saying I'm afraid of it to a certain degree. So how does everybody feel about that? Does anybody else share that fear, or is it, you know, I understand all the reasons, but.
I could jump in on that one. I thought about that myself, because I mean, I've seen it on both sides, being the community member, being part of the team that is presenting to the community. I don't think it should be totally on the developer, honestly. I mean, we know that there's property out there. We know that certain areas are being looked at as having to be developed. I think this is part of that aspect where the community leaders, the city, in fact, this shouldn't come as a surprise to the neighborhood that there may be a project coming in this area, or the potential of a project. It could happen in this neighborhood, you know? There needs to be a lot more effort put forth so that the neighborhood can already have it in their mind that something's going to happen and it's going to engage them. So you, as a developer, shouldn't be the first time that these neighbors in the community realizes, oh my goodness, there's something coming to my neighborhood. It shouldn't be just you. So we as entire community leaders together should be creating a situation where we can make them feel at ease of whatever project it is. And you're always going to have naysayers, honestly. We know that's going to happen, right? But you also can have those people who can help support you that's in the community as well. Let them be part of your advocate group.
Well, I like how you frame that, because I'm thinking of it from the standpoint of I've got a project that's ready to go and then presenting it to a community. But it sounded almost like what you were saying is, you know, let's make an assessment of this neighborhood, and community leaders and some, you know, whether it's the city or a quasi-governmental group says, okay, these are the parcels that we think are ripe for development. What would you like to see here? And so it's more preemptive. So it's not happening at the developer level. It's happening first at the community level, then the developer level. So I like that. That's a good perspective. So you helped alleviate some of my fears. Thank you.
Yeah, I like that vein, Scott. I was just writing a note to myself that conversations often lead to conversions. And both Joyce, Selina, and Mariko talked about how her work impacts people's well-being and health. And that's one of her concerns. And then Selina came back and talked about people again. And then even Safari talked about people and trust. And so Safari and Mariko, you haven't really weighed in yet about, since you've all mentioned people, some of our, I'm trying to see who it was that talked about the triple bottom line. people, profit, and planet. And so I kind of wanted to open up our discussion, since we're already talking about people, to talk about the other P's when it comes to development, the profit side, and how we impact our environment, so that all people have a place to live and have quality of life in the future. That wasn't really a question, but it's just more of a discussion. I know we talked a little bit about the triple bottom line. So if anyone has anything to add around the triple bottom line.
Hey, I can start. I'm looking at who comes off mute first, so I'm playing tag here. So we're talking about the 3 Ps here, right? I think that the planet is one of the P's that's missing the most. I think people is there. I think the profit is there. But when you start talking about the planet, you start talking about green initiatives, sustainability, I think people shy away from it. And it's overall because it, in their mind, for many, not all, but for many, it denotes expense. It's expensive. It's cost. It's going to delay the project. Well, you know, it's planning, you know, so it may be some upfront cost in the beginning, true, but how does that we're talking about the long game. So we're looking at those owners, we're looking at the property managers, you know, you're going to save, it's going to save you money, it's going to save the tenants money, it's going to positively impact the environment. I mean, you start thinking about even with smart city technology, we have the smart meters, but there's so many other things that we can start implementing. We have the sensors, we have, you know, the pollution, we have self-healing grids, you know, it's just so many things that we can do. Solar, you know, why is that? We're talking about RFPs. Why isn't it already embedded when it comes to environmental friendly construction, materiality? I mean, it's the long game. Passive houses. Why can't we see that here? I mean, you think about LEED certification, Crosstown, Concourse, Platinum certification. That's a beacon in Memphis, right? And we have a few other buildings that's got some certification, but we need to see that trend take off more, you know? So I think that it's being educated, knowing that, yeah, there is an upfront cost, but at the end of the day, it's going to be an overall savings for all parties involved. And more importantly, it's going to impact the environment even more so in a positive manner.
Yeah, and you know, Roshun, the triple bottom line, the people, planet, and profit. You know, I agree with these pillars, but you know, each of these items, like Savari said, drive kind of the sustainability of a place. You know, sustainability is driven by environment, society, and the economy. And you know, these pillars can't just be separate of kind of like the three-legged stool. I really think that, you know, the economy can't prosper without a healthy and just society. So it's like you have the environment in a circle, and then within that circle you have the society, and then within that circle you have the economy. And so, I mean, a lot of times, you know, we might address these issues, but we don't go far enough into asking ourselves in our work, like, what do we mean by healthy environment, and who is this healthy environment for? And I think we need to ask ourselves, you know, these deep, like ethical questions, because a lot of times, you know, our work goes beyond kind of this 9-to-5 traditional day. It's more about creating a lifestyle and building infrastructure that allows people to make investments in their wellness.
I mean, I think along with that thought, it's like, what exactly are we talking about when we're talking about people? People, I remember for her description, that involved with the fact that these projects are affordable and that they're inclusive. As what Mariko said, a just environment, something that can match any and everybody that's in our city. And then we think about the environment. We think about when we're talking about the planet, we're talking about something environmentally sustainable. And that, let's just be honest, we need to have a healthy place for us to live in, to survive in, our land, our water. We have so many awesome resources that can really make, and that has already made Memphis special, that we really need to take care of these. Our people really is an environmental resource if we wanted to even break it down to that. And then the profit part, yeah, we need to make sure that everything is financially viable, which is one thing that I really liked about Tamara's and Kiana's discussion, that what their company does, the basic catalyst requirements, characteristics. And for them, tying that all together, especially the part that they made emphasis on was the environmental sustainable part, was that it not only reduced costs to them as owners and operators, which is something that most people think, as Safari said, immediately, oh no, if I add this, it's going to cost me additional money, period. There's no give back to this, unless I've seen it more so that, okay, I'm going to have an environmental consideration because I will get a tax incentive for it. And it goes so much further beyond that, because it says, what else does it help out with is that for the tenants, it actually makes it so that the utility expenses do not add to their rental burdens. And for us, we've seen that when we're using and speccing out specific kinds of HVAC systems, when we're speccing out particular kind of things that help with the building envelope, stuff that makes your building, as Safari referenced, passive housing, yes, but there's still elements that could be incrementally incorporated into your construction that will make this space that quality living space for our tenants, whether they're residential, if they're commercial tenants, if whatever, because now you're taking away that burden of that money having to go toward your utility bills, having to go toward maintenance issues. You now can actually have something where you can afford a nice space to live that's for you. So it's just amazing if we could just break out of this sort of, this is the way we've always done it, to, okay, how can we be innovative to do something more that in the end will become your status quo, and it'll be so much better for it.
I think of the exterior environment around a building or, a piece of real estate as well. So my office is on Union Avenue, and there's a Starbucks down the street from me, and it is the most inhospitable sidewalk between my office and that coffee place. It's, driveway after driveway, dodging cars. There's no trees for cover. So that's another part of it that I respond to that environment. And so I think that's another, it's really a holistic approach, right, to everything that you all have been talking about. And it really does get down, to people. And Joyce, Selina, that's a really great point about, not only, so let's say you're developing multifamily, yeah, you're passing on those utility costs, but are you really thinking about, that small investment? And this gets into profit, right? So that small investment, right, might reduce somebody's utility cost by 25%, which means that they're better able to afford that rent, or perhaps, your rent can grow by a small margin, which ultimately makes the project more profitable. So I think that there's an interplay there that I don't think a lot of us think about. I think we think about the upfront cost and maybe don't think about that ongoing expense.
I find it funny that we're having to have discussions as humans about our environment. Early humans built their cities around resources. So they didn't go, like I was saying with some food work recently, they didn't go and find the most arid places with no source of food. So they looked for places where animals gathered at water. or you can grow green things. So they didn't go find deserts with no oases to build their cities. I mean, we think about where cities are built. Memphis is on a river and a bluff. And so there were, before we built buildings, there was place for us to get food. And so we could continue to live. You think about the ancient cities, they were built around deltas and rivers and lakes and forests. And so it's funny that in the 21st century, we have to have these type of conversations. But I agree, Scott, that you know, if you address the needs of the people on the front end, that means lowering their utility costs long term. Even if you're addressing things like we address things outside of their just their residential you- rental costs or mortgage costs, you think about their food costs. And so you make them a better tenant or homeowner because you're reducing other costs so that you make sure, number one, as the developer, that they're able to pay the rent or the mortgage, so from the lender's perspective, but at the same time, they're able to eat, and you address their environmental issues in, you know, rehab housing. We talk about building up and not out. So if you get rid of the asbestos, mold, and lead, you have a healthier person so that they're not on the hospital system. It's all connected. And so sometimes we just, you know, we get in our silos and we think about one thing, but we have to think about our environment. And then if we don't save the environment, it'll, you know, none of it doesn't matter. If the earth is gone, we're all gone.
Yeah.
Well, I think you said it, Roshun. Honestly, this is reframing the narrative from you saying, well, we have to spend money on this versus you saying, well, we're investing in this. And that brings automatic value to whatever efforts that you're putting forth versus you thinking of it as taking away from something you could have had.
Mm-hmm.
It's investing in our future. And it is more of a long game, a longer game, kind of looking toward a further end point. But it is going to happen because these things have to be done and they will be qualified, and then you'll have the quantifying factor after it, and then you'll know exactly, because let's just be honest, right now it's so hard to get financing for some of these efforts. Why? Because there's no precedent. There's not a whole lot of things where, say, a financial institution can be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea, I love that you're innovating, and I'm going to totally 100% back you up with this. They won't if there's nothing for it to kind of for them to relate to. We come from a world that's really risk adverse, you know. Our real estate agents, you know, you put these new things out and you're like, this is going to be great for your community. The buyers will love living in this. Well, they've never seen it before. So in their mind, these assessors and they're looking at it like, yeah, no, I don't know, because I've never seen this before. And because I've never seen this before, I can't really price it. And because I can't really price it, well, I'm going to go to the lowest end amount of either giving you an additional loan or making this something that's a great product in the mind. You know, I'm not going to value it as much because I have nothing to base it off of. And we're in that world right now where it's almost, you have to think outside the box for there to be a difference. And once you do that and enough people do it, then we'll be able to have that quantifying factor where people are like, yes, that's going to work. That's going to be amazing. I know because there's this example, this example, this example, and this example, but somebody's got to step out and be those examples. And we've got to think of it as more of an investment.
One of the things that I was thinking about that I was encouraged by was when Reginald was talking about how they got creative on some of these, you know, vacant lots, like side lots and things like that. Like, so in the context of what we were just talking about, you know, that triple bottom line, the people, planet, profit, you know, because Joyce, Selina, I think you're right. You know, I'm trying to raise money right now, and outside investors are like, it's Memphis. We're not ready for that. So I think it's got to be very much a grassroots, localized effort or regional effort. So how can we be innovative and you know, kind of breaking the mold. I'm curious, you know, has that caused any gears to turn in any of your heads?
You know, Scott, Reginald's, when he gave that presentation about Detroit's Own It program, and it really intrigued me because, you know, they had over 60,000 vacant lots. In Memphis today, we have about half of that. And Reginald, like, the auction program is something that also really interested me because they would renovate and then sell. And then there was that 50% discount to the city of Detroit, like employees and educators and those in the trade. And so there were these like much lower barriers of entry. And that to me showed that the city really cared or cares about all people. And that speaks, you know, in light of building cities that we can all afford, you know, recognizing and being creative in ways that kind of break down those barriers so that more people can access these opportunities is what that makes me think of. Because, you know, at the end of the day, you know, housing is often a way for, you know, health disparities to emerge and sustain over time.
Yeah.
Our fourth panelist, Brent Hooks, has joined us after being called away to an emergency meeting. Welcome, Brent.
Brent, how are you? Good morning.
Allow me to join you at this point. Super excited about this morning. Very grateful for ULI to allow us to get on and discuss some of the activity that's going on in our market and other markets. So hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. I know these virtual meetings are a little bit different. You can't shake anyone's hand or, you know, give them a hug or whatever you like to do. But great to see everyone this morning.
You too, thank you.
Any other thoughts, Safari? Looks like you were.
I was thinking about, like you said, what Reginald was doing. We haven't seen that before. And that kind of brought me into the mindset of what Steve Luoni, what he was discussing there in Little Rock with the, he highlighted affordable neighborhood design. And he highlighted the pocket neighborhood. And I hate that the Little Rock, you know, CDC, there was a victim of the recession. However, that format, that those 10 single family units on 0.9 acres of land, and they had shared green space, parking, and they shared the infrastructure. So we're saying, hey, let's be innovative. Let's try some things. Well, here we go. Small scale. We can implement, you know, some of these environmentally friendly materialities, some construction, and we can benefit. We can see by bringing that missing middle back into our communities. I mean, Roshun, Doug, and Steve all highlighted that missing middle housing is what built our country. I mean, all of a sudden today we don't know if we want that anymore. Well, if you go in Memphis right now down McLean, as soon as you hit Overton Park all the way to Poplar on up to Union, it's all sprinkled with missing middle housing. And all of the neighborhoods around, their property value has not been impacted negatively at all. So it's like this works. So by us doing the small footprint, seeing how it works, getting some investors, that is kind of shaking the market in Memphis, shaking it up and being innovative and trying something new. And I think we need to get on board with that.
And I think a major part of it is you need to have education, honestly. People have to know that this is a possibility. People have to know and then start to expect. It's like, well, why don't we do that here? You know, I mean, people are power. And the fact is that if they don't know, they can't advocate for it. If they don't know, they can't want it. If they don't know the benefits of it, they're not going to really care. We have to make sure people care about these things and the fact that they should feel that they have a right to having things done better in their own city. So a lot of this is work that you have to start now doing versus waiting until an opportunity presents itself, because what happens, that's when the NIMBYs come out. I mean, honestly, most of the stuff that we love in theory, you think of it as, oh, that would be really great. But then you say, hey, we're going to think about doing this for your neighborhood. It's all of a sudden, no, what is that going to do? It's going to change our character. It's going to do. And it's like, that is not necessarily the case. Well, we can't just tell them that. We have to already kind of preemptively show them the possibilities. Show them that it's not going to change your character. We are just going to make it better. We're not going to change your way of life. It's just a different thought process of what could happen in your space. And these are the areas that it can happen. We need to have either more, not either. We need to have conversations, and then we also have to show them. It has to be a visual aspect where we can show them that this can work. And I think, Roshun, you and I, we read like the beginning of the Missing Middle housing book, where the gentleman, the architect, literally took tours of people through spaces to show them, hey, these are examples of missing middle. This is a real life example, because I think you even said, hey, people tend to forget that we have that here in Memphis. Like, it's a brand new concept, and it's not. So can that be part of the education process? Let's take them on a tour. Come with me. Let's go visit this whole area of Midtown where everything essentially is missing middle and it works. So that's, and Roshun, go ahead. I know
it was funny. I let Brent in. Also, I was texting him. But that Safari and Joyce, of course, we're going to be doing a project soon, a pocket neighborhood together. But just talking about NIMBYs and sometimes how we define who NIMBYs are. It's the first thing I read this morning was the story in the Daily Memphian about opposition to a developer in the Cooper Young neighborhood building, I think, 9 or 10 units on a small parcel of land that was formerly a warehouse, and somehow the Union Pacific Railroad was nearby the Union Pacific Railroad. And sometimes we define NIMBYs as, and I was just chatting with someone also, Seth, in the chat about, we look at wealthier upper class whites as NIMBYs. And the funny thing is, when I was, we were getting ready to start the renovations of a multifamily that was already a multifamily, the neighbors who were single family behind the multifamily showed their NIMBYs tendencies, because I always say that the car industry in the 1950s did a number on the American public. When we extended into suburbia, and it was the single family detached, and there was nothing else that you should have, and you needed to own a private vehicle. And that meant we forgot about everyone that did not own a private vehicle, everyone who didn't necessarily want to live in a single family detached on farmland. So we forgot about the core of our cities for the most part, outside of the wealthier areas that had single family detached and they were the large homes. What about the neighborhoods with the small lot, the apartment community? And many of us are guilty of, in Memphis, for instance, talking about having almost a quarter of our citizens live below the poverty level. And the first words that come out of our mouth are single family detached for home ownership. And I'm saying, how does that match? They are below the poverty level. They cannot afford to be homeowners. Not today. Ideally, we want to increase their incomes, increase their household wealth. But today, the reality is they need quality housing, and we only want to talk about home ownership. So they don't deserve to have a quality place to live because they have lower wealth than the next person. And so it's funny, and Brent, I want you to chime in. Also, we're talking a lot about residential, but I always remind people also, without residents and people, retail and commercial, industrial, manufacturing, they don't matter. We don't need them if there are people. And many of their models are driven by density and where people reside. So Brent, you want to jump in?
Sure. So, I mean, as we continue to to discuss sustainability and how the market is sustaining itself, I tend to agree with Roshun. I like the fact that we do need affordable housing. I was listening to Director Paul Young speak one time. He said we don't really have an issue with affordable housing. We have an issue with quality affordable housing. And overall, the resounding theme that I've learned through these presentations is that one, you need to continue to educate yourselves on the market trends and understand what's going on in comparable markets. But then two, even more, collaboration rules the nation. The more that we can collaborate with, whether it be the school systems in the community, or like my friend Joyce Love said, with the neighbors in the community, and just understand their wants and needs. Basically, Anna is going to ask a question later, hopefully, about like a magic wand, what you need instead of money. And my thing is, I'm going to say you need supply. I mean, we live in a supply and a demand community, but we necessarily aren't identifying the right type of supply, basically, is what I heard from Roshun. She's saying we're supplying the community with single family detached homes, or saying that the supply is you need to own a home, versus trying to develop and understand the market enough where it meets the demand. The demand doesn't necessarily right now align with how we are approaching the market. So that's why I'm grateful in particular for ULI, because as I continue to participate, I'm developing my thought process a little bit more, how I should approach things in the community and discuss it with the individuals who are in this real estate market that I'm so super interested in. And basically, through utilizing those resources that ULI has, and just continue to, understand, like, so we've learned about Pine Bluff and exactly what they're doing down there. I really didn't have a good understanding how comparable they were before this conversation. So that was an interesting aspect. But as far as people planning profit goes, it's kind of funny because I really started hearing it as it relates to sustainability back in 2016. And that was the height of when I was hearing it. I think it declined in my perspective as a buzzword. Maybe I just heard it so much that I got used to it as time progressed, at least in this year, at least. But we had a lot of stuff going on this year. But overall, I think that we just need to collaborate, ensure through that collaboration that the supply meets the demand, and continue to educate ourselves and make sure that we understand how we compare internally by just understanding what's going on in your backyard, right? If you got a landscape, understand what's going on in your backyard, and then evaluate it based on benchmarks of other markets. And so primarily those are my thoughts on what we've been discussing so far.
All right. Any other perspectives on that? We're getting to with about 30 minutes left to go. And I think we want to open it up to some of the questions in the chat. But before we do that, Brent, to kind of tee off of what you just said, let's start with Joyce, Selina, then we'll go to Safari, then Mariko. If you had that magic wand and it wasn't a giant pot of gold, what would you change about, what's one thing you would change about Memphis, or what's that one thing that you would like to see? And then when we're done with that, we'll jump into some of the maybe questions or comments that are in the chat right now. Or if you have questions, start putting them in the public chat and we'll start going through them.
I have such conflicting thoughts about what one thing I would like to change. I suppose one major thing that kind of stood out, particularly from Doug's conversation on the very first session, did deal with the taxes, the issues of how a lot of our project developers have to deal with taxes when it comes to multifamily projects versus single family residential. Kind of to lend to what Roshun was saying, is that our community overall is no longer, and honestly, I don't know if it ever really has been matching the concept of the single family house that tends to get shoved down all of our throats as being the one and only way that a person can live. So many of our demographic does not match that. And the fact that it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, your concept where the single family house in the early years used to be more closer to a no bigger than 1,500 square foot. And then you go to like a 2,000 square foot kind of concept. And you're like, okay, well, you know, I've got my 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and I got some spaciousness going on. And then now the status quo is to have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, plus bonus room, plus whatever else is, you know, the concept of these are all the things that you need in a home. And it doesn't match anymore. Our elderly generation doesn't fit that anymore. Even those that are from these families that typically live in single family homes, well, they've gotten older, they're empty nesters, the space is too big. They may now be on a fixed income. They can no longer afford this big space. So, you know, our lives are in a much more compact kind of living space, which lends itself to multifamily more so. And unfortunately here in Tennessee, multifamily apparently is anything that's 2 and up, which is insane. So that the tax burden needs to go away for homes. Homes are a right. It is not something that should be even a concern for anybody. You should have a space to live. So, and a quality space to live. We're not just talking about, because we've seen plenty of places that are just not, you wouldn't want the person you dislike the most in your life to live in these spaces. So can we make it easier on developers? Can we make it easier on all sides of developers to create these spaces, new buildings, old buildings, rehabbing, whatever, and not penalize them for these efforts? So there.
That's good. Thank you. Safari?
So, Scott, if you handed me a magic real estate wand, what is one thing that I would change about the real estate development in Memphis to make it more productive? I'm gonna cheat a little bit, okay? I'm gonna cheat.
You can't ask more wishes.
I would change the attitudes. I would change the attitude starting with federal, state, local government, from the developers, large to small, in the community, all those invested. And the attitude would change to focus on people. People. Then the planet, and profit will eventually come. Change the attitudes. And then, Scott, as I hand you my wand back to pass to Mariko, I'm gonna drop it and it's gonna bounce twice. And all of a sudden, everyone in the last couple of years who did not get approved for that housing loan, their credit was 790, bam. And it was a mistake because I dropped it. Then all of a sudden, Mariko got it.
Yes, and I come in with my thing would be time control in a way, like the ability to press pause. From my experience, I feel like the real estate development, some projects just take a really long time to put together, you know, between from like selling the idea, engaging the community, building that capital stack. And meanwhile, the project area doesn't move. And then people who aren't involved in that project, they don't really know what's happening. And so how can they hold, the developing community accountable. And so I think that being able to like pause in time and kind of collectively gather our resources so that they're a little bit more streamlined, and that you don't have as many barriers, and you have multiple organizations working in this industry, and it's like, are they able to all share resources and communicate? But that takes time and money and energy, and I think that having a magic wand to kind of let us kind of reframe the way we think about our processes would make a difference.
Okay, so I'll go, and this time I'll try to think more practically versus philosophical. Typically, I do think philosophically, but if I had one magic wand, honestly, Anna, I really would like one place I can go and find all the incentives in Memphis. Like, I really want that. I know I said that before, but that magic wand, if I had one place, like one single location that I can find all the incentives, a description of what they are and how you can get them, and what they are used for. And I mean, I do research, and so I'm cool with assisting with putting it together, because just through ULI, I've learned about a lot of different resources. But I think the community really would benefit from one single place, because as I continue to build these pro formas and analyze these pro formas, I'm noticing, and even when I went through the Ready program, without incentives, a lot of these projects won't be possible. Like, even as I'm working with developers now, like on an everyday basis, they all are looking for incentives. And it's needed, whether it's for a parking garage or for your stormwater system or for whatever it may be. Like, we all are trying to utilize these incentives, and a crafty person, a savvy person, they're going to do their work on their own, and they're going to find, exactly what they need and try to utilize it appropriately. But I still think that, having it in a unified, centralized place will be beneficial.
So let me just jump in and say, duly noted, Brent. I'm glad I've got it on video that you're going to help me put that together. So for everybody else, we were talking about this on the planning meeting. That is something that I think that Region Smart and ULI can start working on. And so we will try and figure out how to make that happen.
I like that. So why don't we jump into some of the questions? I'm going through one of the questions from Keith Lee. It says, as a developer, how does one balance the notion of making profit versus planning for community engagement? Is profit affected adversely, and what are the long-term benefits of community engagement related to profit? I mean, I'll speak to it real quickly, just in the experience that I've had, and it's not all negative. By the way, many times engaging the community helps things get through the approval process faster. And I don't know that I think maybe the one way that it would impact profit is just timing, and time kills all deals. Candidly, the longer things take, the longer, a lot of time people lose the enthusiasm for the project. And the other thing is, and this might not necessarily be related to community engagement, but maybe sometimes you go to a city and the city says, hey, because I used to be in the shopping center world, love your idea for this shopping center. We'd really like to see a Nordstrom here, and we'd like to see this. And you're looking at them going, guys, do you not understand your market? This is not, you may want it, but this is all market driven. This is all market driven. And sometimes that can cause some friction, but from a profit standpoint, the only thing I would say is that it many times can just affect the length of the process, which costs more money. And so I don't know if there's any other perspectives on that.
Well, from my perspective, Keith, they're not exclusive, but they are mutually beneficial. So what we've found is that engaging with, and I kind of mentioned in the residential world, we have better homeowners and better tenants, and we've engaged with them a long time. Well, they're better because we've engaged with them a long time. They're more educated. They have a sense of ownership. And so they're going to protect the asset. If I'm looking at their whole household budget in both instances, whether they're purchasing it or renting, and I'm addressing the other issues beyond their rental or mortgage costs, then they're better tenants and they're better payers of the mortgage. And we've seen that, you know, especially during this time with COVID, we as a landlord and as a mortgage loan investor have found that the majority of our mortgage loan holders and our tenants did not fall behind because we were addressing those other things on the front end, and we continue to address them. So community engagement is not something you stop doing once the project is developed. You keep going, you keep having those conversations with your neighbors. And so you end up having developments that are well maintained because they're making sure that it's well maintained. And they're talking to their neighbors, and they're better neighbors for each other and for all of us. And so I think we need to stop separating those things, that we do generate revenue. We get our rents more on time. Our net operating income is better because we've engaged our tenants and addressed their other needs. And the same thing with those who hold mortgages from us.
And I think we should also think about ways that you can think a little bit more outside the box, because the point is the community needs to be engaged in every project that is going into their community. And there are different ways of being able to bring them into your world as well. There's an architectural development firm or community development firm that I've recently been I've come across, that they have a very interesting process where when they have a community project, they actually have a paid position for somebody in the community that will be a part of their team. So they call it basically the community fellow position. So this person is the person that gives that project a community's voice to it. So there are different ways that you can still engage the community in whatever project that you have. It might be such as this, a paid position. It could be having somebody just kind of every now and again being part of the conversation of a design aspect that you're going through. We've got to find innovative ways to reach out to the community. I know that's something that both Safari and I are very active and engaged with trying to make sure that whatever we do has community engagement in our projects. So let's keep that up and let's try different ways of making that happen.
So Stephen Covey, he wrote that balance is the key to effectiveness in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then as I think about this and we talk about people, planet, and profit, is really in my mind, for some reason, it relates to project management in a term called triple constraint. So it's really a triple constraint, but you have to balance all of those items. I don't think it's going to be any one thing that you can say, all right, this is how you get it to work. I think that you have to approach each situation appropriately. And as I'm learning and growing, I believe approach is always like how you approach it at the beginning pretty much determines the answer. And so I was tutoring this kid last night. It's kind of funny. I was tutoring this kid in math and I was helping him with some problems. I'm like, man, it's all about your approach. Like if you approach it this way, or if you don't know the answer on the front end, break it down. You don't know division that well, but you know multiplication really good. So just flip it around. So I think that as we approach trying to balance the people aspect of it, you just have to be mindful and be mindful that the community, they're stakeholders, and you want all of your stakeholders who are going to be involved in your project or your development or in your community or your life or whatever. You want to make sure that they are considered, but you also have to be confident. You have to be confident that if you have this big, hairy, audacious goal that sometimes you're not going to be pleasing everybody on everything, but you just have to be mindful that you took into consideration the consensus of the needs, but you are a person who's doing, a lot of the times the community, they aren't the experts. They're not going to be the experts on how a development occurs. You're the one that's sitting through a ULI class, or you're the one who's up day and night, getting up at 4:30 like Roshun every day, reading books and understanding what the market looks like. Now, what they are, they're the stakeholders, and it's your responsibility to make them more knowledgeable, because you are the expert, and comfortable with the decisions that they're making. I just think that there's a balance that has to occur as you approach all of these situations. I just don't think it's going to be like here's the answer, this is how you get it to work, this is, this is the balance key. But I got my business partner Mike. He really is like I don't know how to explain, but like a black and white type of person. Like, he gonna say, all right, is it right or is it wrong? And throughout my experience through business school, like, every answer almost was, it depends. So, and I'll be like, well, it depends. Like, I mean, all right, so we looking at a dashboard and 1 meter is over here and another meter is over there. I'm like, well, we got to take into account, like, all right, are we over our KPI in this area? Okay, but why? Should we decrease our marketing because we're over our KPI, or should we decrease how much we invest in talent management? No, we should continue those items, but understand this is why we're here. Like, so it's all, I think it's all about your approach as you try to find that balance.
Mariko, you're off mute, and it looks like you're about to speak.
Yes, well, I was just going to add that in addition to that approach and the mindfulness that Brent spoke about, the intentionality behind, always the intentionality makes a difference. At the end of the day, I think community members, they want to feel included. And, when you think about maybe like repurposing like former like what they were doing in Kansas City, like former schools, or like when you're repurposing these former anchor institutions or neighborhood anchors, I mean, people's memories and connections are tied to this place. And so it's important to, especially if you're, coming from the outside in, it's, this like us versus them mentality, it's being able to communicate to people on that forefront is very important, and being intentional about how you're kind of like crafting this place and crafting your own narrative, and how you'll fit in their story and how their story will fit in your story. And so it definitely goes both ways.
I just want to kind of piggyback off of that, Mariko, because Kansas City, that was pretty special, what Shannon did. They did a lot of footwork in the beginning before they even brought projects to the community. So, but with Westport Middle, right, she said that the community's voice was heard. They had their desired developer and desired reuse. Now, will that always happen? No. But in this instant, it did. So what does that do for the community? Well, now they have buy-in. They feel that you care about us. Again, going back to that intentionality. So what they're going to do, they're going to support, they're going to rally, they're going to take care, they're going to protect this project. So again, will it always happen? No. But by you engaging the community, putting it legwork in the beginning, not already saying this is what we're going to do. Hey, these are a few options. Give us some feedback. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? What do you think about this? Okay, so 1 and 2, no, that's not going to happen because XYZ. We've done it. We can't pencil this out. But 3, this can happen. And explain to them why things change. Even if they don't understand it, by educating them, well, hey, you took the time out. I don't understand everything, but you're engaging us. We appreciate you having all these meetings. We don't necessarily agree with everything that you're doing, but you care about us. We're going to trust you. That's dealing with people. That's good business.
I'm seeing not a whole lot of questions, but
Yeah.
I
Roshun.
had one question sent directly to me about commenting on how a facade and exterior design impact that ability for communities to accept a project. And I know I've gone through several situations and project reviews where that is a serious concern because, you know, visually things affect people. They don't like what they see. They're going to put that wall up of, okay, I don't want to do this. And we think about, I think in this particular person, I'm not going to name since they send it to me privately, but the statement was that their perception of the missing middle in some areas is scary because there's this sort of disconnect with how they look from one building to the next in the neighborhood. And that is a valid concern, right? You want to, if that's the type of character that you're talking about in the community that you feel has been negatively impacted, that's understandable. But making that be the definition of what all quadruplex will be, what all duplexes will be, you know, is wrong. The project typology is not what's wrong. It could be exactly what you said, something as simple as a facade design to that particular project typology that is the only thing that really needs to be addressed. So how do you do that? And that's where we're trying to talk about having more community engagement, having more of the community buy-in to say, okay, we understand that there are fears and you want to have some say as to how this looks in our community, but it's not all bad. So let's show you some of the options. These are things that will work with this project typology because it's important that we do incorporate these new project typologies into our project. When I'm talking about typologies, I'm talking about the duplexes. I'm talking about the missing middle projects that are 4 units, could be up to 12 units. I mean, it's amazing how you can just incorporate this look and it still fit exactly within a community. And it has all of these additional units that would not affect the look of the character of the community at all. So let's start engaging in that kind of conversation. Let's make sure that they're in, you give them examples, whether it's physical, let's tour this place. I mean, I know right now with COVID, that's a little difficult, but hey, let's do a Zoom meeting view, you know, somebody come in and do a video of these different particular entities. Just let's do something to help bring that conversation out so that it's not just a blatant no when you go, hey, we would like to incorporate this particular type of project in our community. Let's say this is what we want it to look like. This is how it will fit. And that is part of community engagement. So that was a pretty good question to help communities to accept a project. We are visual creatures. We need to see what it's going to look like.
In that theme, there are several state comments about NIMBYism. And I kind of mentioned it with our apartment complex that's already an apartment complex and single family people being opposed to an apartment complex that has been there for 40 years. But Keith just asked another interesting question about, as emerging developers of color, what changes do you see happening in Memphis and what additionally is needed to support your efforts?
So I was just start by saying that ULI is one of the best resources that I've ever seen. Anytime I'm not getting paid for this. I probably need to, but
we'll send you that check. Thanks.
But I mean, I honestly have so the change that I'm seeing is just the activities and the involvement and the evolution of ULI and the resources that they're presenting to the community. I think it is one of the best resources. Anytime that anyone asks me about what can they do to increase their efforts? I said, hey, are you a part of ULI? Do you check out ULI? Do you understand what they do? Like, do you understand the resources they have available? It's not just a local thing, they're national. So they're going to give you a bunch of different perspectives, and it might seem like a water hose at first, but then you probably, if it does seem like that, you probably don't have your strategy down anyway. So you just need to consume as much as you can. And then as you narrow down your strategy, because it's not a get rich quick scheme anyway. So based on your strategy, utilize the resources that align with your strategy. Like, this is how you're going to approach the market as a developer, and they got all the tools and resources that you need. And then from there, you probably just, a big part of, anything is, it's cool to get in the gym and, shoot some jumpers, but until you get in the game time, until you actually start working on a project, whether it's a single family home or a duplex or a quadplex, that's when you're in the game. And then you hit these $1 million projects, multi-million like Roshun, you in the playoffs. So, so we as young emerging developers, we need to get in the gym with ULI. We need to get in the game with our own personal projects, and then we need to be like Roshun and Roshun and Scott, and just get in the playoffs. But it takes some time.
Injured in the playoffs.
I want to echo Brent's thought. ULI is amazing. I'm also not a sponsor, but I'm definitely a believer here. And prior to going onto the website, being introduced, I didn't know that this resource even existed here in Memphis. But Dr. Lee, one thing that I think about, you said what additionally is needed to support your efforts. I think we need more collaboration, more partnerships, and even more so mentoring, because we're still learning. We don't know it all. You have some seasoned developers, and the more we can learn, going back to what Scott said, let's share this information. Let's share this knowledge. We don't need to hold everything to our chest, afraid that we're gonna, lose this deal. Let's continue to train those up and coming emerging developers so we can continue as a whole. We're talking about Memphis. We're talking about the community. So when one developer is no longer here, that needs to continue to grow, right? We need to continue to prosper as people and as a community. So by us having those relationships, having it mentoring, then we all can be uplifted together.
And I agree with that. Just based on the disparity studies that they've conducted over the years, mentoring is actually like one of the primary recommendations. So if you go back and look at all these disparity studies that they continue to conduct, so they have a number of different recommendations, but the one that I've seen that's beneficial, at least that's benefited me and from what I've seen for others, is the mentor protege type relationships, but it has to be a win-win situation to where you're a value-added resource to your mentor, and it's not just like they're giving you all the game, because you gotta give them some game too. So you have to give them some knowledge and some value added. Y'all like to talk in the professional terms, so you gotta give them some value added resources, value add to their situation.
I guess I would say build your team. You need to build your team. And this team is not just your developer buddies. It is also your planners, your architects, your financial advisor. Have somebody that build those relationships with a bank or two. We know sometimes, as Roshun said, it doesn't always pan out because you're like, hey, I have a relationship, me, and then they're still scared for your project. Well, guess what? Have a team that will help you be persistent, help you continue on your effort to make this happen. But you need a team. You need that team that helps you visualize it and to be able to adjust and change as the need arises. And then again, have somebody from the community as part of that team. Let's finish that team out. Somebody that the community knows is in fact part of that community on your team. Let them know that you're real about this and you're real about making sure that they are engaged in this whole conversation. So yeah, I mean, there's endless opportunities and possibilities ahead of us for Memphis. It's going to be so much fun. Mariko, are you ready?
Yes, I mean, I echo everyone's thoughts, honestly. I think, as we heard, in most of all of these projects, partnership matters, picking the right team goes such a long way. And yes, finding, especially emerging developers, finding mentors to not only empower you, but to share their lessons learned, because there's so much learning to do on all parties as they're working on projects.
Okay, we've come close to, we have 2 minutes left. Anna, I don't know if you wanted to jump in and have some announcements or something to add.
Right. Well, I just wanted to thank everybody. A huge heartfelt and round of applause for our panelists today and for Roshun and Scott, who have been moderating the entire series from the beginning. The one thing that I would like to say is we are right now in the process of sort of looking at what our content and programs need to be in 2021, starting in January. And so if you have ideas, put them in the chat right now. I've been watching the chat and copying it and looking, and one of the things that we are trying to do as an organization is to listen to our community and to hear what our community needs to be more successful personally, professionally, and for the community. And so, if there are tools missing in your tool belt, we want to help figure out how to fill that tool belt up. So, so please share your ideas. If you come up with something, if you're like me, you don't have the thought right now, but an hour from now or 2 days from now, you come up with something, shoot us an email. I mean, we genuinely mean that. I was looking at some of our programming that we've been doing for emerging developers this fall, and so much of it has come from listening to the participants in our other programs and them saying, well, I don't know how to do this. And we're like, great, if you don't know how to do it, there are probably other people that don't. And we really our participation in some of our classes has gone up dramatically. So we're trying to identify those needs and fill them. So please keep sending your information to us, your ideas. That's how we come up with good programs like this. And with that, again, I will just say another thanks to our sponsors and our 6 panelists and moderators today. I was loving looking at the screen of the 6 of you and thinking, this is the future of Memphis. And this is what it's going to look like. And it makes me feel very much like we're in good hands. So thank you all for your time. And I'll hang around for a little while. If anybody wants to turn on their camera and share their idea with me or add the chat, we're not going to cut it off immediately. But with that, everybody have a wonderful Thursday, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. I have to get off for OAC.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Everybody be safe. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, y'all. You were great.
Bye-bye.
Really appreciate the 4 of you.
It was fun.
Good.
It was. Thanks, Anna.
Well, good. No, thank y'all. I appreciate it. It was great. Couldn't have asked for a better panel. Y'all were awesome.
Hey, Anna, it's Felicia.
Hey, Felicia.
Hey, quick question. Are the earlier sessions recording somewhere?
Yeah, so we've got them all recording, and we are working on setting up a page on our website that has all the recordings and presentations and that sort of thing there. It's just taken us a little while. As soon as we get that together, we'll send a notice out to everybody that attended, or actually we'll just put it in our newsletter probably. So we'll let you know when that's up and available.
Great, thank you.
Sure thing, Felicia. Thank you.
Wonderful, this is awesome. It's been awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. I think you're muted.
Yes, I am. I've got a little crying kid. So my question for you is there a class, and I don't know because I just started these classes. So is there a class on connecting you with knowing who's who, if that makes sense? So like, you know, if you, as you're an emerging developer, you're like trying to figure out your contacts, subcontractors, contractors, who's who and all of that. But is there something that kind of helps you with that? And then the other one is the incentive piece that Brent talked about. You know, we've got classes that tell you, yeah, here's go to HCD and go here and go here and go here. But, you know, when we were doing our project last night, one of the things that came up was, well, how much can we deduct from it, right? Like what isn't a good guesstimate on the incentive that we're going to get if we do this project. And so unless we were to pick up the phone and call someone to figure it out. So I'm wondering if there's ways for us to look at samples. So something that's more sample based. So if we were to look at a project that's already been done and get a developer who's already done something, and they could say, okay, this was what my pro forma looked like. This is what the reality looked like. This is what we ended up profiting. Someone who's willing to share their past as a sample study so that we can better then say, okay, well, if that worked this way, we should be able to use it in this way versus hypotheticals.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So two things. So one is we have not cracked the code yet on that sort of networking and how do we connect people and let other people know that, hey, here's this subcontractor and that. And so we need to figure that out. So I'm not quite sure how to capture that yet, but you're not the first to ask that question. And so I'd like to figure out, and certainly there's probably a COVID answer to it and a non-COVID answer to that.
Right.
But yeah, so if any you or anyone else still on the call has thoughts on how to do that, I'd love some ideas, because I do think that that's important. It feels a little easier to me when we are non-COVID, because we, you know, I mean, obviously the networking just sort of happens that way, and we can certainly be more intentional about it. But so some creative sort of, what are we going to do for the next, you know?
So
year?
I'm just talking out loud, but I'm wondering if it's like, you know, for example, for me, you know, I've been in the real estate industry for, I don't know, 7-8 years now, and I still don't have a good electrician. So for me, what's holding me back as a developer or even a flipper is I want to make sure that I have the reliable sources, right? Before I jump into it. So I'm wondering if you do something where it's like, okay, you contact a bunch of electricians that you guys know, and you have a networking that's just about meeting electricians, and you have the electricians stand up there and say, this is who I am. You do the same for HVAC, you do the same. And I know I'm talking more from a general contractor standpoint, but you could do it with general contractors too, right? Here's and you could get, I'm wondering if you get the all the people who are speaking to sponsor it so that they get a voice. Hey, we're going to put you in front of this many emerging developers, you know, will you be willing to sponsor it? And I guess now you'd have to do it as Zoom because of COVID, right? But, you know, which I know everyone's Zoomed out, but at some point in time, it could be a networking event.
Yeah,
hopefully.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Those are the only two things that I'm stuck with right now.
Right. Well, and even just a forum, I think, to figure out how to exchange that information. So, you know, hey, I need a good electrician, and then who else sort of in the alumni class, you know, of people that are participating in these programs, you know, because I mean, our ultimate goal is to create this sort of ecosystem of shared resources. So we need to sort of figure out how for you to say, hey, I'm still looking for a good electrician, and Safari to say, great, here's who I use that was really good, you know, on a couple of projects, try them.
Is there a Facebook group for alumni?
No, it's not, but actually we've been talking about needing to do that. And so
I know as realtors, that's how we do it. We have a realtor group in Memphis of realtors that just share their resources.
Somebody in your class just recently suggested that on one of their ready evaluations. Actually, it's just that we kind of set up an alumni place where y'all can communicate with each other, that we don't have to, that, you know, Dylan and I don't get in the middle of it and hold things up. we don't want to be the bottleneck to those exchanges. So that's a good idea.
And then the only other thing I could think of is true mentorship, like true mentorship, you know, like I was thinking in my head, is it possible for me to, you know, call Frank Smith and say, hey, Frank, I'd love to volunteer on your development and do it for free just to learn, you know? So like internship opportunities where you're saying, I'm going to give you 10 hours of my week just to learn, you
Right.
know?
Yes.
Um,
And we have been
that's good.
we have started talking about that and calling them fellowships and how can we connect people and make this. It's really interesting I actually was in a conversation last week with a banker who, you know, we were talking about so we're going to have a class on December 2nd where some bankers are going to come in and describe what a lender package actually should look like. And they're sort of like, here are the 10 mistakes we see made all the time, and here are the 10 things. And so we were talking about that one of the challenges for anybody who's doing their first project is you're new, right? And so there's no like, here's my past history of 3 successes.
Right.
And so, which is true in any industry, but I think becomes an even bigger challenge in real estate because we're talking about such bigger projects. Even the small projects are big, right? And so,
but there's also a disparity there, Anna. Like the thing that I've learned is, you know, I've had some of my, and I know this is a tough thing to have a conversation with, but I've had some white male colleagues who are like, here, contact this banker and he'll get you set up and I'll never get a call back.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
And I don't know if it's because I'm female or because I sound young on the phone or what is, but I won't get a call back. I won't even get a text back from them as bankers, you know?
So I do think, so that's another, so I mean, I think that one thing that we hopefully can help do is close that gap some and figure out how to make connections with these bankers. But I want to tie this back to the mentoring. One of the things that I asked this particular banker that I was talking to is I was like, look, so, you know, I understand that if I'm a first time developer and I'm coming to you and I need this loan, that I'm riskier. So how do I reduce that risk?
Yeah.
And one of the things that he said that was really interesting, he said, the biggest challenge we have is that he said, more frequently than you can imagine, people come to me and they say, hey, this is my first time and my architect's first time and my engineer's first time and my realtor's first time. And they're like, you know, that's too much risk. And so they're like, we need these people to say, and I hired so-and-so to do the site plan who's, you know, been doing this for, you know, 10 years or whatever. So that's what, but then so I said, well, let me ask you this. So if a new emerging developer, first time project came to you and said, and here's my letter and part of my team is XYZ developer who's been in Memphis for 30 years and, you know, works for Boyle or Bells or Henry Turley or any of these sort of names that we've all grown up knowing for so long. And they agreed to sort of mentor through, and the banker said that would make a huge difference on your application. We would acknowledge that as something. And I was like, even if that person wasn't putting in money, he was like, certainly that would help. He's like, but if I got a letter and you said so-and-so is he's gonna meet with me twice a month and review, you know, like, so I think there's some really finite things we can do with that fellowship and mentorship that truly translate into, you know, my project gets picked, you know, I get the money I need, I gets approval or whatever. So yes, I think there's lots of and then I also just wanted to connect you back to, I wrote down also, I love your idea of there's one thing to like list all the incentives and then the other to sort of, how do you translate that into the assumption I put into my pro forma, you know, is that going to help, you know, is that going to get me $5 or is that going to get me $50,000? Because,
right.
You know, and sort of understanding that. So, I mean, also so that you can figure out, you know, is it worth my time pursuing? Because a lot of these incentives create some more paperwork and that sort of thing. And if, you know, some of them may be more worthwhile your time than others.
Right. And then understanding which ones you could double dip or triple dip, or you have to do this one and you can't do this one. You know, what are those rules? You know, if you're new to this, it's just kind of like looking at it. It's tough, like trying to navigate it.
Absolutely.
So that's all I've got before he starts crying.
Good. Those are great. I appreciate it.
You have a great day. I'm signing off.
Thank you.
All right.
Enjoyed it.
Corey.
Appreciate it.
Sure thing, Farrah. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right. Anybody else? It looks like we still got some other people sort of listening or in. Any other questions I can address or ideas people have? All right. Thanks, everybody. Hope y'all have a great day.